Okay, welcome everybody to another back to school session from Macmillan Education, this one from the MENA team. Today we are going to be looking at the topic of engagement and motivation. So a really interesting, engaging, hopefully, topic for our next hour or so. Lots of people saying hello from very familiar places, lots of familiar names. Good to have you with us once again. I see lots of very familiar names, actually. It's lovely to see you all. I hope you're all doing well. A few more people coming in. A very familiar name there. Hola, hi. Give people a second to come in. And then we can begin. So for those of you who do not know me by now, I'm not sure how that's possible, but there might be a few people who have come in new to the community today. If you don't know me, my name is Nathan Waller, and I am the teacher trainer for Macmillan Education here in the MENA region. And my role, my task, if you like, is to help teachers in MENA, so a very large area covering everything from Morocco to the UAE. We've got Saudi Arabia, right up to Kurdistan in the north, and everything in between. But my task is to help you guys in your quest to advance learning, advance teaching and learning here in the MENA region. And as you know, we've got the Professional Development Academy, which our team has founded to help us to do that. So this back to school session is part of our academy activities, but we also have plenty of other activities in the academy as well. Hopefully everybody here has already been to the new websites. It's very small at the moment. We have loads of content that we're slowly getting around to organizing and uploading, but do register as a member on there so that you can keep up with what we're doing. If you subscribe, you'll get the newsletter, which we're going to do quarterly, and that will just tell you all the updates for that quarter. Good. Lots of people I do know. If you are new today, please let me know. It would be good to see if you are a newbie or if you've been to many of our activities before. So let's get started with our webinar. Let's do an introduction first. How is everybody? Back to school has probably started for most of you. If you're in Egypt, probably not. But it's certainly if you're in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, some other places as well, I think have already started school. If you have, how are you doing? If you haven't, also, how are you doing? Not in Georgia, not quite yet. I think another week or two, perhaps. As part of this question, how are you all? Let's think about how did we do over the summer? The summer seemed very, in Jordan, you have already started. Summer seemed very fast to me this year. I don't know why, but the summer seems to feel shorter and shorter every single year. I don't know whether or not they are stealing days from us or whether or not it's just that we are busier and busier. I'm not sure. Maybe you have the answer to that. But please share with me, what did you enjoy doing over the summer? And I will share with you two things that I did over the summer. The first thing I did was I did manage to get a break in amongst all of the preparations for back to school and the website that I was doing. I managed to get a 10-day trip to Italy, and it was absolutely fabulous. The weather was perfect. The food is amazing. I managed to get a lot of walking in. In Dubai, it's very difficult in the summer to walk anywhere. So I got a few hikes in, which was really nice. A lot of fresh air, which was definitely needed for these old brain cells. My Apple Watch freaked out and thought that it had been stolen because my step count went from 2,000 a day to 20 to 25,000 a day. So it kind of freaked out a little bit. But my body certainly needed that additional injection of fresh air, good food, letting go. Yeah, one day I did do 25,000. I did a pretty big hike. And I collapsed into a bathtub at the very end of the afternoon. But I have some fabulous pictures. which I will definitely show you at some point, Ola. Although you can go to my Instagram and see them there if you wish. Traveling around Georgia definitely does not sound like too much of a hardship. I've traveled around Georgia a little bit, and it is an incredibly, let's use the right article, an incredibly beautiful country to travel around. If anybody hasn't been to Georgia, if things open up in the future, I would definitely recommend it. It's stunning. So what else did what did other people do? That was the first thing that I did. I did get to enjoy a trip. You may have been in a country where restrictions were still kind of active, so maybe you didn't get to travel, and maybe you did something enjoyable in your own country or even within your own town or local community. It could have been a community activity, it could have been a family activity. What kinds of things did you enjoy doing over the summer? I did one, which was travel, and I did another one, which was we adopted a puppy. So we went to a rescue center and adopted a small puppy, which is keeping me very busy. He is currently being very quiet behind a barrier, so he cannot enter this room. If everybody is very good and engages with us throughout the webinar, maybe I'll introduce you to him towards the end so that we don't disturb him too much. He's currently sleeping. If anybody is on the MENA PD Academy Facebook page, you probably already had a sneak peek of what he looked like, but we'll introduce you at the end, maybe. So what did you enjoy doing over the summer? Some people traveled, some people perhaps relaxed. Did you spend all of your summer preparing for back to school? Yeah, you definitely attended a lot of webinars, really engaging with that professional development, which is fantastic. Were you, though, preparing for back to school? How much of your time and energy has been put into your back to school preparations? And perhaps another question, or something you might like to share, is what did you do this year to prepare for back to school? Natia is saying that she attended lots of webinars, which is great, learning lots of new tips and tricks, hopefully, getting a lot of advice, how to engage her students. What else did you do? Did you do anything differently this year than you perhaps did last year or the year before? Yeah, preparing worksheets, getting things ready, getting organized before the chaos, probably. What other things did you do to prepare for back to school this year? And how are you feeling about back to school? Somebody in Jordan mentioned that they've already gone back to school. How did you feel? Was it what you expected? Was it different? Oh, preparing some Doodletown lesson plan preparations. Good. We've got a little bit about Doodletown, I think, later in this presentation, actually. Give people another few seconds in case they want to write. Yeah, not yet ready. Mentally, we want to continue with the summer. Keep it going. How do your students feel about back to school? Are they happy to be going back if they're going back to face-to-face learning? Perhaps. We'll look a little bit about this as well as we go through the workshop. They're happy. Good. I'm glad they're happy. Good. Thinking about making online learning more entertaining and effective. So you're continuing in Georgia with online learning. Okay. So for now, maybe not quite as happy as they could be. Probably depends on the age of the student, and it might depend on how much they engaged with the content over the last year. Okay, good. So some nice introductions. So today we are going to be looking at engagement, motivation, active learning as part of that. And then we'll see if anybody has any questions towards the end as well. Nice and simple workshop. Okay, so it's going to be quite interactive. So I want you to get on the typing. I think probably a lot of people are watching on their phone, which is absolutely fine. You can still engage with the chat box even if you're on your phone. But on a scale of 1 to 10, all you have to do is write a number. How engaged are your students right now, do you think? If they've just started school, do you think they're going to be very engaged? Do you think they're still not going to be very engaged? It's going to be a mixture of numbers coming up, I think. 1 being the lowest, obviously, and 10 being most engaged. Okay, so we've got people quite optimistic. 8s. 7s, 5s, we're getting worse. We're sliding downhill. Depends on you. They will be a 10. Yes, that's that positivity that we need. 8s and 9s, so people still quite high. Good. 6, some people kind of in the middle. 7. Okay, good. Nice. So people feel like their students are engaging, which is good. Nice, easy question to start with. A few other people are still writing their numbers. We've got 6s and 7s. No one really low, which is nice. No one feels like the majority of their students aren't engaging at all. And this is probably because of the amount of work that you guys have had to put in to ensure that that engagement and that motivation remains high. But there could be a bit of fatigue, yeah. I think that's probably true. If they've been doing just online classes for a long time, that fatigue can often set in a little bit. Okay, let's look at these children. Are they engaged? I used this in this picture last week. I won't describe it this time. If you were there last week, you got the story behind this one. But this week, we're just looking at whether or not they're engaged. Lots of people agreeing, yes, they're engaged. Their focus is on whatever it is that they're supposed to be looking at. They look pretty engaged. Okay, let's dig within this picture a little bit deeper. Are they motivated? This is a slightly more difficult question to answer, I think. I think they're motivated. Some of them look quite, yeah, this guy here, I think, looks quite surprised. The one kind of at the top, at the back left, he looks a little bit unsure about what is going on. But they look like they're having a good time. Can't really tell if they're motivated. And I think the question is, are they motivated to do what? I guess perhaps is the question there. So there's definitely a difference between engagement and motivation. I think we're already starting to feel that one out. Some of them seem quite scared. I don't know whether or not that's just to do with the moment that the cameras are snapped. I don't remember any of them being particularly scared. Some of the smaller ones, if you look right to the left, there's a girl. I think she's quite young. So she might be a little bit shyer, a little bit more reluctant to what's going on here. I haven't seen this before. And some of the older ones look like they get the jokes, perhaps. There was a lot going on, and obviously there's a lot of context within this picture. But let's dig a little bit deeper. Are they learning? Now, obviously, you don't know what it is that they're supposed to be learning, if they're supposed to be learning anything. It could just be a fun play that they are watching. They don't necessarily need to learn anything. So I think if we think about the difference, there's a difference between engagement, motivation, and learning. And just because one is happening doesn't mean the others necessarily are. And this is something we need to take into consideration, I think, when we're thinking about doing activities that engage students. Students can be engaged, but might not necessarily be learning anything. And I've seen a lot of things in the past where teachers think they need to be hyperactive and making everything super fun and making their students laugh. But I think teachers don't necessarily need to, they're not employed to be children's entertainers or clowns or these kinds of things. So we need to differentiate between being engaged, being motivated, having a good time, but also working towards those learning outcomes that we're setting. Now, this activity that they're doing did actually have an advocacy purpose, so there was a learning outcome to it, and we would have had to have engaged with those children in an activity after this one to see whether or not the activity that we did resonated with them in some kind of way. Obviously, you won't know that looking at a photograph, but it's interesting to see the difference between the three. Good. Okay, now, obviously, we need to always discuss the pandemic. It's always there. It's been around for a long time. At the very beginning, I remember doing these kinds of webinars right back in February, March 2020, when there was all of that kind of panic going on. Engagement really was a core part of the struggles that people were facing. We've been forced to go home. Everything's kind of starting to move online. We're not sure how to make that happen. Even if we can figure out some of the technology aspects, our students aren't used to engaging with us in this particular type of medium. So as the pandemic has gone on, what kinds of things have you guys done to engage your students over these last 18 months that you perhaps didn't do before? What kinds of activities or strategies have you used? Let's share some of them together, I think. Okay, educational games. Good. I'm sure a lot of people used games a lot to try and engage with their students. Good. Projects, presentations, and discussions. Okay, good. Were these slightly older students? Were these primary or secondary or young adults? I ask because I think teachers of very young learners and primary age probably struggled a little bit to do projects and presentations in an online setting. Activities through apps, yeah, so we had to learn a whole bunch of new apps, things like Kahoot and Padlet and all of the Google apps. All of these things people were learning continuously. A lot of games, yeah, visual aids, good. Videos, competitions, more games, good. Yeah, games. A lot of games, yeah. Try to hook them in with the games. Zoom sessions, which I'm sure you had a complete spectrum of, from absolute disaster to quite successful, I'm sure. A big, steep learning curve, I think, when it came to finding new ways to engage students throughout the pandemic. Good. Okay, good. I tried to think of some that I thought might come up. Well, obviously, everything's been online. We've had to engage our students through an online format, which has obviously been very, very challenging for teachers who perhaps didn't engage with a lot of digital content prior to the pandemic. If you were pretty happy in a face-to-face traditional type of setting, the move to online would definitely have been a bigger shock to the system than those people who perhaps were already integrating it into their teaching. I think a lot of people used quizzes. I mentioned Kahoot. We had to learn a whole bunch of apps, games, lots of people using lots of different games, people using breakout rooms quite a lot. And there's been some other ones there as well, different things that people have done to engage. Yeah, different types of rewards. Be interesting to know the rewards that you used were different or similar, but in a different format to the rewards that you used to use. Points and stars. Yeah. What else we got here? Good. Okay. There's been a few different ones, projects and presentations, discussions. Okay. Yeah. Using certificates as a way to. Okay, good. Now my question is for you then, I've got some here and some people have written some different ones in the chat box. Would you say that these are externally engaging or intrinsically engaging for the student? Are they something that we're trying to draw them in, or is it something that they saw and wanted to go towards? It's a difficult question to answer, probably. But we're going to go on to look at this idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in a minute. But it'd be interesting to think about whether or not the things that we've been doing to engage our students, probably a lot of it is quite extrinsic, I would guess. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so let's look at the topic of engagement first. We've got 3 areas to look at, 40 minutes. So engagement. I found this quote: "The positive relationship between student engagement and achievement is well documented." So we know that students that are engaging do better. That's, I think, a pretty clear statement. But the nature of this engagement is less widely considered and narrowly defined. So we know that if students, the students that do engage with the content, with us, with each other, tend to do better in school, but we're not quite always sure exactly how that materializes. So let's take a journey together. So I want to do an imaginative activity with you right now. So I want you to think back, way, way back, to when you were a baby. Now, you probably cannot remember when you were a baby. I cannot remember when I was a baby. I can go back to around 4, I would say. I don't think I can remember much before the age of 4. But maybe you can. Some people have a gift that they can remember back slightly earlier than others. If you cannot, you're going to have to imagine. So what engaged you when you were a baby? What kinds of things? You're a baby right now. I've transformed you. What's engaging you? Sounds engage you, yeah. You're engaged by sounds. What's going on? Colors, toys. Nice, your students were allowed to bring their toys and snacks, good. Cartoons as a baby, I'm not sure we'd have understood what was going on too much. Pictures, toys, music. I don't know if babies are too competitive. It's a bit too young, I think, probably. Toys, songs, colors and pictures, definitely. Lots of colors. If we think about babies, we need to think bright colors, pleasant sounds. Think about what babies do when they manage to get their little hands on something. Where does it go? They manage to grab that colorful wooden block. What happens to it? It tends to go. Actually, the puppy over there is very similar. Yeah, everything goes in the mouth. So we engage through the senses. Yeah. So everything is sensory. That's when we're developing as a baby. We're learning about the world around us through our senses. They shove everything in their mouths. They're attracted to bright colors. In fact, I won't go and get it, but the puppy's toy is on the floor there, bright green and fluorescent blue. This is how we are starting to make sense of the world around us. We're engaged through color and stimulation. So sight, smells, what we smell, what we hear, whether we like it, whether we don't like it, these kinds of things. Okay, good. This is as a baby, everything through the senses. Let's think about kindergarten. Let's move forward a little bit. They're up, they're running around, they're annoying us. They're not annoying us at all. They're amazing at this age. I used to work in kindergarten. It's my favorite age to work with. Kindergarten, what's engaging you at this age? You've developed a little bit further. Is it all just sensory still? Or is there other things that engage us? Yeah, good. Songs, actions, games. Dancing, love it. Music, games, music, TPR, yep. Emotions, definitely. Yes. Learning about our emotions as a toddler. Yeah, perhaps fun activities, action songs, play, lots of play. Kindergarten is all about play. So when I first started in this career, it was all about learning about play-based learning because I was working in kindergartens. Role playing, yeah, lots of dress up, role plays. Yeah, definitely that learning through play. So we've moved on from this sensory learning to play-based learning. Actions, movements, touching, playing with, figuring out, exploring, all that exploratory age. Crafts, puzzles, loads of great ideas here about what's going on in kindergarten. Keep all of these in your mind. We're getting a little older, we're aging rapidly. What about primary? We've started to settle a little bit. Our learning is kicking in. What engages us as primary students? Is it the same as kindergarten? Do primary students like the same things as kindergarten? Or do they change a little bit? We're supposed to be personalizing this. Are you changing a little bit? So now we've got competitions, positive reinforcement, they're more outgoing. Perhaps they can engage in more difficult puzzles. Okay, good. Gifts, educational trips. Okay, good. So they can perhaps process more complex information. Whereas in the kindergarten, you're still learning how to differentiate between conceptual, two-dimensional pictures and reality, what's going on in the world around you. For anyone who's ever done any work with that kind of early kindergarten age, you'll probably have gone through an experience where you're sitting with pre-primary children. And I remember doing this in a school in Manchester, and I was holding a flashcard. I think it was of a fire truck. And the student clearly knew the fire truck as a vocabulary, as a picture. But there was one actually outside of the front of the school, and I was trying to get him to see that they were the same thing. And he looked at me like I was completely crazy. I was like, that's a fire truck and this is a fire truck. And he was like, how can there be two different things that are fire trucks? That does not compute in here at all. So good, lots of things going on here. But in primary, they definitely can. Yep, so spatial awareness, this kind of thing. Good, they're more into gamified learning, we've got field trips, feeling more independent. Yeah, so that growing independence and confidence, not needing to be monitored all of the time. Good, so there's a good change that we go through when we go from kindergarten to primary. And then what about moving further into our teen years, the troublesome teens? What engaged you when you were a teen? You might not want to remember your teen years. Mine were pretty horrific, but what motivated you or engaged you as a teen? And I think it would probably extend this one around independence and confidence. Learning about dangers, okay, so perhaps responsibility, yeah, someone's just put that actually. Yeah, learning about responsibility and wanting to be more independent, but also feeling perhaps that you don't have that independency quite yet. You're still largely controlled. So you're in that transition phase between being a child and being an adult. Quite difficult. Friendships are very engaging, yeah. Even in primary and kindergarten, but certainly as a teen, group dynamics are very important, whereas they might be less so. In kindergarten, you're probably happy to run into the kindergarten and befriend anybody and everybody and lick them in the face and all this kind of stuff. As a teen, yeah, finding your own identity is a big part of what engages us. We're engaged with things that we feel like we're connected to in some way. Good, so there's definitely a difference there as well. Yeah, we're engaged by a lot of external factors. Role models come into play, things like movies, music. We're very, I can't get the word out, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Influenced is the word I'm looking for. Good. Do you think that teens are engaged or motivated by rewards in the same way that primary students or kindergarten students are? Definitely not, no. Their rewards definitely need to be very different, I think. When you're in kindergarten, the reward could be something very simple and doesn't really have a lot of meaning attached to it, but you seem to love it because it's bright and colorful and has sparkles all over it. As a teen, yeah, perhaps that's not going to work. Giving you a lollipop when you've been to the dentist is still fun, I think, even as a teen, even if they wouldn't admit it. But yeah, they probably become more expensive, the things that we need to reward them with. And expectations seem to have gone through the roof in the last 20 years, I'm sure. The expectations of rewards and gifts and this kind of thing. Interesting, really interesting area. And lastly, here we are now. We're all fully grown up. We're all adults. What engages adults? The last one. I won't go into older people. We'll just finish on adults. Adults are definitely not like teens. Yes, we're motivated by salaries, choice and voice. Yeah, learning new things, but also choosing what we want to learn, having that freedom, that autonomy to decide what it is that we want to do. Yeah, we're motivated by personal growth. We're motivated by external factors as well, like family, I think, expectations that are put on us by others, which is different to when you're growing up, I think. So I hope we enjoyed that journey. Yeah, look at this, like traveling, money, movies, spending time with loved ones. And I hope we can see that there's different ways that we're engaged and how that changes for each of us as we go through these different kind of phases of our life. So it brings us right back to student engagement. So what is student engagement? Now I looked up the word engagement. I thought I'm going to start there. Well, let's start with the word engagement itself. So I looked it up in the dictionary and it had some really nice words, actually. Of course, we think of engagement as, taking part, being a part of, participating. But I think that's quite a simplistic outlook in terms of what it is, just this kind of being involved, just being there and present. I think we now know that certainly in the classroom, just being there and just kind of participating doesn't mean that we're motivated necessarily. It doesn't mean that we're learning necessarily. But I like some of the later words, this idea of sharing, this idea of interconnecting, uniting, I think are really nice words. Kind of extending that a little bit. The next group of words was more around actually the ability to kind of grab attention, difference between participating like I'm here, like I will do what you want me to do, and these kinds of words, capturing, arresting, seizing, captivate, which is a really nice word. Yeah, I like somebody's put unity there. It's a really nice word. Being engrossed. So when somebody is engaged, fully engaged, they're engrossed, they're absorbed. What's going on here? They get that focus, I think. So we're looking for this. We're looking for this focus, absolute absorption. This is what we want from our students, to occupy. And the last one, which I really liked as a definition, was to establish a meaningful contact or connection with. So I like this word meaningful. We're absorbed, it's meaningful to us. Yeah, it's a personal thing. And we're engaged with it because of this. But it's something here in front of us that we are engaging with. There's something external that we want, that we're aiming for. It could be a goal, it could be a person, it could be an activity, it could be anything. So I thought it was nice, but it also led me to this question: is engagement an art or a science? I'm on the fence about this one. I'd be interested to see what people think. Is engaging students, is there a science to it? Can we follow a series of steps and get that engagement? Or is it an art? I would agree that it's a bit of both. I think there's science behind it, But I think the ability to get somebody to engage with something is probably an art. So we have to learn that as teachers, this art form. Teaching often can feel quite science-based. You have these methodologies and these pedagogies, and they feel like there's these steps, PPP, TTT, whereas actually to get them to engage, it's about personal connection, it's about emotions, it's about the ability to instill a sense of belonging, for example. And these are important things that most teachers learn the art of and get their students to be able to engage. Teachers are very good at that, I think. But yeah, I would say I lean into the art, but I think science plays a bit of a role as well. Yeah, and needs a gifted teacher. Do you think then, if it is an art, do you think that people are born teachers if it's a gift? Because if it's a science, anybody could be taught, I guess. You could teach somebody how to be a teacher. But do you think that some people just don't make good teachers? This is an interesting area of debate. Maybe we'll make one of the podcast sessions around this debate. Can teachers really be trained to be teachers? Or do you think there's something in each of us that made us a teacher in the first place? There's lots of yeses here. Good. It is a talent. Good. Excellent. It seems like we don't need a debate at all. Everybody is definitely on one side. Excellent. Okay, so found another quote. So around student engagement. Student engagement is the mental state that is the product of motivation and active learning. So engagement is a product. It's not something that we're trying to do. Motivation and active learning can lead to engagement. This is from Elizabeth Barkley. I can post that link later on. But she breaks this down into two areas. She says in terms of engagement that there is a thinking aspect and that there's a feeling aspect. So for the thinking aspect, we are engaged when we are personally engaging with those higher order thinking skills. So think of that, you could think of it as a pyramid or an inverted pyramid, depending on which most familiar model you are of Bloom's taxonomy these days. But think about those higher order thinking skills. If students are engaged in those thinking skills, they're more likely to be actually engaged. So those words that we had before, absorbed, captivated. Yeah. If they're doing lower order thinking skills, just remembering. So if they go through a whole lesson and the only thing they needed to think about was remembering an answer for when a teacher asked them a closed question, then the chances are that they're probably not engaging with the lesson very much. So look for those opportunities to really draw out those higher order thinking skills, and that will lead to greater engagement. But that cannot be the only way. We need to also bring in this feeling aspect that we've already been talking about. They need to have an emotional connection to what it is that we want them to engage with. And we've done lots of work on this already. It could be using sensory types of activities, making things musical or colorful, these kinds of things. But it could also be bringing in their own personality. Somebody in the chat box earlier mentioned that they allowed students to bring their toys or personal items to class, and certainly that's easier in an online setting. But that attaches that emotional, that feeling aspect, because they're actually talking about something that's personal to them. And then that feeling aspect is there, and they feel more engaged. And also when they're listening to somebody else, I think they can also. So yeah, definitely they need both of these aspects. They come together and they work together. Okay, so let's go back to our original scale. Everybody was pretty optimistic. Let's think about that question, though, a little bit deeper. I didn't want to push it at the beginning. I just let you write a number. But I want to think, has this number gone up or has it gone down from before the pandemic? So go back to 2019. What was your, how engaged were your students before that? Would you say it was lower or higher? You think they were very engaged? you had it down to a T. I knew what I was doing. I knew how to engage them at different times of the day or times of the year. And of course, all that got thrown up in the air. But it's really important that we think about why. What were some of the factors that contributed to some of them being engaged or not engaged? And I've put both there because I think if we think about what happened with the pandemic and this move to online learning, we cannot say that it didn't work for all students. I'm sure there were some students who were probably very shy or perhaps had certain barriers to learning for them personally prior to COVID that maybe weren't seen, maybe weren't recognized, but that maybe actually moving to an online environment worked better for them. You know, if you had autistic students, for example, not having that face-to-face classroom pressure could have actually been more beneficial for them. And the students perhaps with dyslexia may have found new ways to engage with content as well. So it could be a little bit of both. So there were factors that contributed to some of them engaging more, but there was probably a lot of factors that stopped a lot of them from engaging. And definitely somebody's put their stress and anxiety about our lives. So certainly for very young students, for those of you who are teaching pre-primary especially, but certainly also younger primary, this I don't really understand. We've all been sent home, like, I don't understand why I can't go to school, was a big factor, I think, for a lot of young learners. And then, of course, you have additional stress. So family members losing jobs, people being stuck in a small property altogether for long periods of time. Dynamics within families changed a lot. You know, and then things about anxiety about the future. If they're in primary, they see things that are going on. And, you know, even younger members of my own family, you know, watching them change and develop over these last 18 months, them taking on what would previously been sheltered from them, these anxieties about what's going on in the world, what's going on within their own family, this kind of thing, has played out a lot, I think. And this contributed to their ability to learn and to engage with schooling and this kind of thing. So we need to take that into consideration. Impacts on their engagement a lot, I think. Okay, so there's a little bit about engagement, and we've just seen that it's kind of broken down into two kind of areas that feed into this product of engagement. And one is motivation. Now, motivation is something that we've probably talked about a lot, but let's just have a very, very quick look at motivation because I'm conscious of time as well. Obviously, we all know there is an intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Is this intrinsic or extrinsic? Our little everything is awesome, dude. Intrinsic or extrinsic? A. Yeah. He's very self-motivated to jump out of bed, get on with his day. He looks pretty intrinsically motivated. He looks pretty happy. He looks like he's got his, it's just weird because he works in a construction site, right? So I don't know how happy he is to go to work, but he seems pretty intrinsically motivated. I'm trying to think of his name. Can anyone think of his name in that movie? It's gone from my brain. Emmett. I think he's called Emmett, isn't he? And what about B? So B, if A is intrinsic, then B, obviously, we've got Homer Simpson there. It looks like he's being forced to do something on the board. I'd say that's extrinsic. Looks like it's being forced upon him a little bit there. So we've got these two ideas, intrinsic and extrinsic. And I'm sure I don't need to kind of go into too much detail about the two. Intrinsic, we know, is usually defined within this kind of carrot or stick type of methodology. Are you going to entice them with a reward, or are you going to kind of scare them into doing the activity with punishment? And we see this in schooling, certainly traditional schooling, a lot. This carrot and stick methodology. If you do this, you will get this. If you don't do this, this is what will happen to you. Carrot and stick. Students kind of being pushed through the system with this kind of like, sometimes we will kind of chase you from behind, and sometimes we will kind of lead you from the front. Yeah. Of course, we know that this approach, this purely carrot and stick approach, feels a little bit like this for teachers. There you are, Mr. Chameleon, I guess. Is he a chameleon? Looks something like that, some kind of lizard. And your students feel a little bit like this. You want them to drink, but they just don't want to. And this is this carrot and stick. And this guy goes through this process. First of all, he will try to convince the horse that if he drinks the water, he will get a carrot. Yeah, he will get a treat if he does the thing that he wants him to do. And then as that doesn't work, he slips into this, the other side, the stick. So if you don't drink the water, I will punish you in some way. I will put you in a isolated field without the other horses, kind of thing. Tries both, usually leads to a lot of frustration on the part of the horse, the student, and on the part of the teacher as well. But there's obviously more to this picture than meets the eye. Of course, sometimes they're just not thirsty. And why are we so intent on making him drink? Obviously, this is a huge metaphor that I'm wrapping this all up in. We need to relate this to the teaching and learning and our students as well. And of course, we need to, the horse obviously cannot talk, but our students can. So we can discuss with them, try to break down this extrinsic motivation and try to lead them down a path of independence, autonomy, self-determination, getting them to choose what it is that they want to do and guiding them towards our learning outcomes, but in their own way. Yeah, obviously that's easier as they get older. Of course, we cannot forget Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure everybody in the room has seen this before, this idea that our needs build one on top of the other, and we're moving towards this self-actualization. I'm not going to spend any real time on this one today, but I will mention it again in a bit. One area of motivation that I am most interested in, because we talk about this intrinsic or extrinsic quite a lot, but quite often we don't delve into this area of demotivation. So sometimes we feel like students are unmotivated. Sometimes we can even fall into the trap of thinking that they're lazy. We also need to question our own actions. Are we demotivating them by the things that we do? And it can be quite difficult to self-reflect on that a little bit. Thinking about, let's say we are doing face-to-face learning. If we are doing something with one student, we could be neglecting another student. And sometimes they feel like they're demotivated because of that. Praise can fall into this trap a little bit. If you don't use praise most effectively, or in the way, trying to think of the right way of saying this. If you don't use, there's a very good webinar by Carol Reed about this, using praise to best effect. Because if we praise a student, another student can feel like, hang on, this, if she's saying he's good, that means that I'm effectively not good by the fact that I didn't get praised. So there's a lot of dynamics within the classroom that we need to take into account. I'll give some examples, actually. And we need to remember that children are actually very capable. There's some examples here, but I read actually only earlier this week that a 12-year-old boy, I think it was in the UK, earned, I think it was 300,000 euros selling NFTs of whale pictures over the summer. So he's earned more money than I probably will see in a long time. And he's 12, and it's amazing what they can do and what they can discover. And there's lots of children that are capable of doing lots of amazing things if we give them the opportunity, I think. In terms of intrinsic motivation, if you came to the session last week, you would have seen this already. But intrinsic motivation is broken down into these three areas. Mastery, we like to be good at things. Autonomy, we like to have our own choice in what it is that we want to do. And when we looked at that timeline, as we got to kind of adults, we realized that there was a lot more autonomy we could choose. We engage with things that we want to. And for younger children, that's not always the case. Activities are made for them. They're directed to do this. The outcomes are set for them. But that can also inadvertently lead to a lack or a loss of intrinsic motivation if we don't take that into account and build in their personal feelings about what it is we're doing with them. Get them to co-design some of the activities for themselves or for each other. And we've already mentioned a lot of things around purpose. If it's meaningful, if you're talking about your own toy, then there's purpose for you. So you're intrinsically motivated to do a good job, to say something nice about it and use more complex language than if I just gave you anything to describe. And I put this picture in, actually this is part of a video that I made before, but I think if we look beyond the student as a student and think about what they're like outside of the classroom, the student's a little bit older perhaps, but even this could be older primary. Students, we need to learn about what they're doing outside of the classroom. You know, they come to class and they haven't done their homework and we're kind of mad at them because we don't think they're learning. But actually, if we can delve into what they're doing outside of the classroom, it's possible that they're making YouTube videos. They're making 300,000 euros in the background, you know, and they're not always doing it alone. Their friends are recording them. They're uploading stuff. There's loads of things that students are engaged with outside of our classrooms. So if we can learn about those things and bring that into the learning, bring that into the classroom, students will be more engaged, more motivated, and willing to actually use that language that we want them to use. Personally, I think that. A lot of people here are agreeing, yeah, it happens. This is the kinds of things that they're interested in, they want to do, and they're good at it. You can find a lot of very young students doing lots of things on apps that we've never even heard of. I know lots of them are into YouTube and TikTok, Instagram, this kind of thing. But there's other apps that I can't even really explain what an NFT is. I know it's some kind of digital token, but I certainly wouldn't know how to make one. And yet this 12-year-old has found a niche, picked an area of something that he's interested in, and he's found a way of making money out of that, which is incredible. How can his teacher utilize that story? I said I wanted to give an example, and this is a really good example. Actually, this is, I think, from a secondary course book, but I will actually set you guys the homework of doing this yourself. So take the book that you are currently teaching with, the course book, and look at the teacher's book and analyze that statistically in terms of what it's asking you and the students to do. And you'll find that actually, if you critique that teacher's book from a motivational and from an engagement point of view, it can actually be quite there's lots of imperatives going on. There's lots of like, tell them to do this, ask students to do that, elicit this, ask this question. A lot of it's not very student-centered. So critique that teacher's book. Think about how you can adapt that to be more engaging, more motivating for them. How much is the teacher's book guiding you to do individual tasks? We want students to be doing more collaborative work in class itself, but actually a lot of the activities in the book could be individual tasks. So can you set them for outside of class learning, and then perhaps bring them in and extend them with project work, etc.? Or where is pair work? Where is group work? Where is feedback? He's starting to get restless. I'm going to go let him out, I think. Bear with me. I'm going to put him on mute. I knew he would wake up eventually. He's going to be a pain. So we can introduce you while he's here. Hey, you. Hello. There you go. You're going to be a pain now, huh? Go on, off you go. Be good. Anyway, sorry about that. I'm sure he'll come in and continue to... Yes, he is a cutie. He looks like a little bear. Let's see if we can get through the next few slides. And then he'll come back again, I'm sure. But anyway, we were saying, definitely evaluate the student book. See how to, this is how you engage people within a webinar, and you bring a puppy to it. Works every time. And it brings me back to that last question. Are we unconsciously or subconsciously demotivating students? Even if our actions are intended to motivate them, it's hard to know how they feel about that. So we need to be continuously self-critiquing ourselves. Bring you a little closer. Okay, is that a little bit better? Probably because I've been talking for a long time. And this is some of the areas that I came up with in terms of, okay, we want them to be more kind of competent. We want them to be, I should say confident. We want them to become more competent, but also more confident communicators. We want this dual aspect: competence, knowing the language, knowing the skills, but also confidence to be able to get that across. A lot of students know a lot more English than they're actually able to get out, I think. So these are some of the tips that I came up with. Involving them, obviously, we've mentioned, making it fun, stepping away from the book a little bit sometimes, bringing in supplementary materials, activities, making projects are always good ways to engage students, but making sure that the instructions are clear, and explaining why we're doing what we're actually doing, making it very clear to the students what is expected of them, how we're going to go about that, and what the end result will hopefully be. Vary the social dynamics as much as possible. I always think don't overcorrect. Certainly if it's if you want to improve that confidence and those presentation skills, correcting them all the time can be a bit disjointed, I think, for students. And we've already mentioned using praise wisely. Okay, we wanted to talk about active learning. I'm going to try and get through this quite quickly. What are young learners motivated by? So we mentioned this before. We were looking at, let's say, kindergarten and primary students. So we've been thinking a little bit about what motivates them. If you want to refresh yourself, you certainly can in the chat box. Did I write down some? I think I did. Yeah, so we've thought about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So they're firstly motivated by safety and security, making sure that they stay alive, making sure that they have access to food and water, this kind of thing. But above that, they have relationships, feeling belonged, feeling loved, feeling valued as part of a group, this kind of thing. Once they get above that, we're getting into the more self-actualization part of that hierarchy, which is where we want to be focused as teachers, really. So they want things to be fun, they want play-based learning. As we go through primary, we start to see play kind of dropping a lot, I feel, when it becomes very examination focused, very kind of curriculum heavy. Play takes less center stage, but play is actually still a really important part of learning, even for upper primary. And play just takes different formats, doesn't necessarily need to be running around in the playground. They learn to play in new ways, more sophisticated ways. You want to let eat this. As we mentioned, everything goes in the mouth. Come on, out you go. Okay, but I wanted to think about music, art, actions, and projects. Okay, hopefully he doesn't eat that. Stopping him from eating wires is my primary objective these days. There you go. Okay, so, because we're running out of time. Yeah, music. We mentioned music at the very beginning. Music is a big motivator. So I'm going to skip this one, actually, because this was just about the 4 areas. So the course books, different course books have different focuses in terms of how they choose to engage students. Some use a more kind of musical pedagogy, some are more story-based, some focus on project work a lot. So think about your own course book, whichever you're using. If you're using Tiger Time or Happy Campers or Global Stage, it has its own kind of focus, but a lot of those other things are in there as well. And maybe you can adapt and base some of your activities on them as well. One was music. Happy Campus uses music a lot. It has a musical program built into it to help students consolidate new language skills. Why is that? It evokes our emotional side. So music is culturally universal. We all enjoy music. There isn't a human out there that doesn't seem to become attached or has some kind of emotional connection, because it fires parts of the brain that help us to remember. How many of you have ever got a song stuck in your heads? Yeah. So within the course book, there are memory hooks for vocabulary. It helps us to recall. It helps us to retrieve previously presented information. It helps us to remember because it attaches it to a melody or a rhyme or a chant. And we talked about this moving from the sensory stage into short-term memory and long-term memory. So if we want our students to learn and become competent English users, we need to get that English pushed as far down the long-term memory as possible. And we can do that by using the senses, introducing it through the sensory stage, reinforcing it with activities, and hopefully sending it down into the kind of deep-term, long-term memory. Now, you might not be using Happy Campers, but you can still bring a lot of this music in. A lot of teachers in face-to-face learning will use different types of music to stimulate their students in different ways. For example, if they're doing group work, you might put on classical music in the background to help that level of concentration, set a focus for the group. If you want to do something where you want them to remember particular vocabulary or introduce something, you do action songs. So you do something more upbeat, and get them moving, bringing that movement, language, and sound all together. And you can do other things. So we use visual clues a lot. We tend to use a lot of pictures. We tend to use a lot of videos with students. But there's still a lot of power in that audio. And we can use it in different ways. I think people think of songs as just something we do, we sing with them. But actually, we can use audio clues in other ways. For example, you could have a treasure hunt. We often use visual clues for treasure hunts. So you see a picture or a word, and then you go off and find something. But we can do that with audio as well. Yeah, and using realia as well. Good. So music is one area that can be very engaging for young learners, because it's something that we all have this capacity for. Art is another one. And we have Doodletown, which is designed around this use of art within the classroom. So using visual, audio, and hands-on activities for very young learners. But this idea of doodling, this idea of artwork as a medium for learning. And again, it stimulates our brain in different ways. It allows young learners to play. They play through art, through painting, through doodling, because it's personal, it's expressive. We can express what we want. And it also provides a really nice vehicle for meaningful production. If you do a piece of artwork or a painting, and then you're asked to describe it, you're more engaged with that piece of work. You're more likely to want to try to describe it than if you're just handed a flashcard and asked, what is this, for example. We mentioned action again already. For those of you who came last week, we talked about puppets, making puppets very engaging as a classroom management tool, but also for other things like social and emotional learning, global skills, thinking skills, getting students to make their own puppets and use them to present language, to hold conversations, to be able to step outside of themselves and use something else as a vehicle for their production. But those puppets need a world. They need to be given a personality. They need to have a meaningful connection with that puppet, I think, is very important. Another one is stories. So stories can be very engaging as well. Why are stories engaging for students? Students love stories. They want to sit down and listen to stories. And there's lots of stories in lots of different course books. Stories have become, SEL is social and emotional learning. So this emotional and social aspect of learning who we are, how we feel, this kind of thing. Stories are really effective. And for those of you who engaged with the story-based approach module that we did last year, we definitely did loads of work around using stories in the classroom to greatest effect. And stories can be used for so many things. If you didn't engage with that module, again, go to the website, the MENAPDacademy.com website, and that module is now available as a self-study module. It'll take you a few hours to do. You can do it bit by bit. It's broken into sections. You can do it by yourself. And at the end, you can do a submission, which I will see, and I will give you feedback and a certificate based on your submission. So you have to do a practical activity around the story in your classroom, and we will give you feedback on that to help you engage with stories, engage your students with stories and through stories as much as possible. And there's some really rich stories. Don't be afraid of readers. Readers are one of the most underutilized resources, I think, or I feel like. Readers are great for students. They're tailored to their age, they're tailored to their ability because they're mapped to the CEFR. And they're really great ways of getting students to think about things, to answer questions, to engage with the language in a real and meaningful context. So don't shy away from them. And we're so fortunate now, more fortunate than ELT teachers were 20 years ago, because these stories, the same story is available in video format. So we can use differentiation, we can show the story and engage students with the story in different ways now. You can engage them with it in a class setting all together, reading the story to them. They can do it themselves. They can be reading it at home. They can watch the video on Navio. So there's lots of ways to interact with the story, and a lot of ways for them to see that language in a meaningful context and engage with it in meaningful ways. So stories are great. Use stories as much as possible. They're very engaging for students. Sometimes when you've got older textbooks or older course books, the story can feel a bit disjointed from the unit, and we kind of just skip over it. Sometimes we'll just make students stand up and read it out loud, and okay, let's move on to activities. But actually, a story-based approach is a great approach. Pre-reading tasks, getting them thinking about the topic, the characters, feelings, again, bringing this social and emotional learning in, and then reading the story together more than once, looking at it, evaluating it, and doing post-reading activities, extending the story, making a project around the story, thinking about one of the side characters. What if we were to change and make them a central character? How would they feel? How would the story change? All of these are really great, engaging activities for primary students, I think. And the last one, projects. Projects are very engaging for young learners. I've mentioned them a lot already. They add meaning, they add context, and they take learning beyond the classroom. And you can build projects up. They're not something that just need to be done in one lesson or a couple of lessons or to end a unit. You can do semester-based projects that run over a long period of time. We're now more used to using online types of formats and applications and social media types of things. And you can privatize some of that stuff. So you could make a private group. It could be done within Google or Microsoft. But building up collections within digital platforms that students can also add to over time. And they can comment on, and they can talk about it, and they can bring things into class. Again, so much opportunity to engage them and get them talking and using the language that we want to do. An example of that, this one is from Give Me 5. We've just all had holidays, so there you go. Mimi was on holiday. I could model using Mimi's holiday what I want them to know, rather than just doing something straight out of the textbook. I could bring all of this language in the context of Mimi, if I was using Mimi's wheel. And I can bring in beach and city and mountains. But this format helps us to structure the project, plan it out, how to create it, how to use it to actually cooperate with each other, to present, building up those confidence in presentation skills, which is really important. So lots of stuff around project, and we're going to be doing more stuff on projects in the next couple of weeks. So again, if we have a module, so the module I mentioned about stories is a self-study module because it's already finished. But the module for projects is live, so it's running at the moment. Registration is open, it's on the website. So again, go to the website and sign up for that, that module. Again, 3 or 4 hours, but it's nice to do it live sometimes because we can talk to each other, we can show each other our work, we can ask questions and support each other as a community rather than I just did this and get feedback from the trainer, I think. So go to I'll put up the website link in a bit, but go up and sign up. It's free. And anyone, as long as you're teaching here in MENA, you can access that module. And you can add it to your professional development portfolio as well. But we're definitely going to be looking at projects in more detail. Why are projects great? How to set them up, how to evaluate them, use them for assessment purposes. All of these kinds of things we'll be covering in that project-based learning module. We've mentioned online learning a lot, but I did want to put something at the end about engaging online. We know that it's more difficult to engage and motivate in an online teaching setting. We did some research at Macmillan, the central team, and this was a lot of the feedback that came through, that it's really difficult to engage and motivate. So, you know, best of luck in terms of if you are still teaching online. If you've gone back to face-to-face, don't forget how difficult it was, and don't bring some of what you've learned into your new way of teaching. Of course, if you are teaching online, routines are very important. Students need to know what's expected of them. But try and encourage independent learning through a flipped approach as much as you possibly can. And use your synchronous time for more interactive, communicative activities. Those story times can be done in your synchronous times. There can be a set of time, part of your class time set aside just to read a story to them. Sometimes you feel like if I'm just reading to them, they're not actually doing anything. But that listening to a story and engaging with it afterwards, or even throughout, is still really important for them. Having that listening time. I think in online, we feel like we need to make them do stuff all the time. They've got to be doing. Otherwise, I'm going to lose them. If I'm talking too much, like in a webinar, you feel like you're losing people along the way. So we have this complex problem, I think, for ourselves. But listening is still an important part of their learning process if they're online. And stories can be a really nice way to kind of bridge that gap. But get them moving. So even if you are reading a story, perhaps choose a story which asks them to do something. So they can go and get something. They can show you something. Yeah, I like this, love this comment. Self-directed learning with meaningful learning. So we're trying to bring in as much as possible. And use visually appealing apps which draw them in. So we were talking about that at the beginning. Gamified learning experiences. For example, Navio, which if you're using Global Stage or Give Me 5, you know, you have this wonderful Navio app, which engages them in that content in a context that's appealing to them. Yeah, it looks like a video game. They have an avatar, they can decorate them. They move around this kind of virtual world, doing different activities or jumping in a spaceship. But they also have to do language activities to move from stage to stage. But they really enjoy using that type of learning experience. And if you're not using Navio, you can still bring some of those concepts in as well. But I think we need to realize that simply using technology doesn't necessarily lead to engagement. And in fact, there was a study done. So I have a question for you. They did a study with a large cohort of children, and they wanted to know about what motivates children to use games. So this question, I'll pitch it to you. What are the main characteristics of some of the most engaging computer games for children? What is it about those games that engages children? They're fun, okay? People have different definitions of fun, so that could be a difficult one. What's fun for one person might not be fun for someone else. It's active learning, definitely. So, it's active. Yeah. So you have to actually do something. It's you doing. Yeah. Good. Free of stress. I'm not so sure it is free of stress. If you've watched my youngest brother, who is a teenager, old teenager now, playing video games, you would not think that it's not stressful. It sounds very stressful. He has to be controlled externally sometimes. He gets a bit carried away. But they're fun, yeah, engaging. Well, what is it about them that's engaging? It's a difficult question, I think. Yeah, the pace of the game can make a difference. Yeah, I would agree with that. Although I remember when I was young and I played those early video games, a lot of them were not fast-paced. They were actually, I remember, does anyone ever remember Dizzy the Egg? He was one of my favorites. You had this kind of large world. And I remember they designed it in a way where you had to collect something in one side of the world, and then you had to like trek like way, way over to another part of the world to kind of use it. So you had to kind of pick up a spoon over here, and then you had to like walk for like 15 minutes and up the steps and jump across clouds, and then you would get to a point and you'd have to use the spoon. And a lot of people got very frustrated with that type of game because it wasn't pacey enough. Good, there's lots of things coming through while I've been talking. Games, they promote critical thinking. Yeah, definitely. They're colorful. Colors, yeah, and that sensory aspect comes in again. I think one of the things is that and let's go back to that intrinsic motivation, that the 3 items that we had. Mastery. So games are designed in a way to push us. Yeah, I think they use that Vygotsky style, that kind of zone of proximal development. Yeah, they're pitched just kind of higher than our capabilities. So we're always being pushed to do a little bit more, I think. So they're designed in that way, this sense of accomplishment, yeah, unlocking new levels and rewards. Yep, they're rewards-based. The visuals, the way they're designed, yeah, and the sound effects are very kind of, they draw you in. We come back to all of those words that we saw around engagement at the beginning, that captivating. Yeah, if you've watched young children playing video games on an iPad, or they're captivated, aren't they? How can we learn from that? Yeah, concentration. And concentration is an interesting one, because when it comes to educational literature, they say that attention spans are quite limited, and students can only, I think, is it something like you can only concentrate for as many years as your age or something. But when they play video games, I mean, they can be absorbed for an entire day, and they won't even eat. You'll be like, hang on, you've been on that video game for like 10 hours and you haven't used the bathroom. Hey. Exceeds their limits, identifies their goals. There's loads of great stuff going on here. So the next question was, I spent a long time talking about that actually. So they gave them this game in this study, and they said to them, we're going to make this game and we want to map it to one of the curriculums at school. It'd be really interesting. Which one do you think these kids chose? Which curriculum? Which area of learning? Was it whatever, science or history or geography or English, or what do you think they chose? So they predominantly, in fact, I think it was really high. It was something like 93% of them all chose the curriculum the same. Science. Sarah's going for science. Science and art. Okay, Sam. So I'll give you a few more seconds because I want quite a few people to answer this one. Math, experiments, math. These are primary school aged children that this study was done with. Math and science. Okay, a few more people will probably write, but a lot of you are actually on the right lines. They actually chose math as the curriculum that they wished this game to be mapped to. And they asked them, obviously they did a study with them, so they wanted to know why. And a lot of the kind of quotes that came out was things like, I want to get better at maths. They realized that maths is kind of a little bit boring as a subject to learn, and they wanted to learn it in a fun way. And I find that really interesting, this idea that students will tell us what's fun and what's not fun. They can tell us what it is that they wish to be improved, and also make suggestions in terms of how we could improve that, if I think we would only ask them sometimes. So I thought that was a really interesting study to read. I will try and find it and post the link again as well on the Facebook page, I think. Okay, so we come to the end. A few final thoughts. The start of the academic year is very important. I wouldn't even get into the book for the first couple of weeks. Make those first few weeks all about getting to know each other, building that group, that social group, those dynamics, building values, respect, trust, setting boundaries, all of these things. The start of the year is imperative to how the rest of the year plays out. So spend a lot of time getting to know them, getting to know each other, and then utilizing that. We want to develop those intrinsic motivational skills. So think about those video games and what they do, and how you can incorporate some of those philosophies. Students naturally want to be good at stuff. They do want a little bit of autonomy. We've got to be a bit careful in terms of how much autonomy we give, but everything can be made more purposeful all the time, more meaningful. Critique yourself as much as possible. At the end of each lesson, think to yourself, did I demotivate anyone during this lesson? Am I demotivating some students by motivating others? Think about those dynamics as much as possible. Be quite critical of yourself and what you're doing and how you're doing it. Remember that we engage when we feel valued, respected, and heard members of a group. So that heard part, bring in their voice, ask them, communicate with them, like this guy's trying to communicate with me, and involve them not just as students, involve them as complete persons. Remember that they've got anxieties, fears, shyness, their own personal family circumstances, and all of those things play a role on how engaged they are in an individual lesson, but over a period of time as well. And we didn't mention a lot around focus, actually. But remember, and we've been talking about this a lot here at Macmillan, mindfulness, well-being, that contributes to our ability to focus. So again, think of all the different ways that we can improve our students' well-being, and do mindfulness activities with them, train them to be mindful of themselves and mindful of others. And that can lead to greater focus, I think, as well. There's been a lot of content in this webinar or this workshop. This guy, he described engagement is distinct from motivation, energy in action, the connection between person and activity, which is really nice. We've already mentioned this. Students can be motivated to learn, but not be engaged in their learning. So remember the differences between the two. And they state that engagement is evidenced by behavioral, emotional, and cognitive indicators. So there's 3 areas that you can really pay attention to. We can see when students exhibit behaviors as participating in activities. This is behavioral. We can see their signs of interest and happiness. We can analyze that emotional aspect. And we can also keep pushing them to be more self-regulated and independent. Give them opportunities to show that they're capable. And if we do that, hopefully they will be more motivated, they will engage more. The more they engage, the more they do. It keeps, that cycle goes on and on and on. And those outcomes hopefully will be much, much higher. I will keep my fingers crossed. I will be continuously connecting with you all throughout the year to get your feedback on how that kind of stuff goes. How does this stuff go for you? You are the ones who have those students. You're in that classroom. Give us that feedback and let us know what aspects of the course book do students engage with more or less. How can we help you to adapt what you're doing to get the most engagement out of your students? and to drive that motivation up and drive those outcomes higher. Anybody got anything they want to share at the end in terms of how you might go back now, go back to school, or just go back to the classroom for engaging your students this year? Any ideas? Anyone want to share anything right at the end? This is your workshop, so we'd love to hear some of your ideas for how you're planning to engage your students. Maybe there were some ideas in there that you want to think about or work on, or maybe you've got your own ideas and you want to share them as well. Please do feel free to put them in the chat box or to connect with me personally and let me know, because I would love to know. And because we have just a couple of minutes left, does anybody have any questions that they want? Yeah, befriend them, build those personal connections. So important for motivation. If anybody has any questions, I will give you a couple of minutes and you can type them if you wish. But if you want to share anything, if you want to comment on anything, please feel free to do so. My email address is there. Please, at any time, feel more than welcome to get in touch with me. You can either email me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I answer quite a lot of messages on there as well. Certainly go to the website. In fact, I will put a call to action here. Give me a second. People are writing. Okay, there you go. See. So at the top of the thing, I put a banner with a direct link. It goes through to the website. So if you want to go onto the website, look up the modules. Please get involved in the live one, but also do the self-study ones. There's two. There's one for story-based learning. There's one for improving inclusion in MENA, and we'll be releasing more and more modules over the next coming months. The session has been recorded, and it will be on the MENA PD Academy YouTube page, probably tomorrow, although tomorrow's the weekend. Sunday at the very latest for some. So if you go to YouTube and type MENA PD Academy, you'll find all of the recorded sessions that we do are always hosted there. So you can watch it in your own time. You don't need to wait for me to send out. I will be sending everybody personally who attended a certificate probably early next week. I will get around to doing that because there's probably 100 of you. It takes me a little while, but you will get a certificate. Anyone who has attended, I see all of your email addresses and I will send you one personally. So you don't need to worry about not getting it. If you haven't heard by the end of next week, you can send me an email, but I guarantee that you will all get one next week. While I was typing in that, did I miss any questions? Hopefully it was engaging for you all. Was there anything at the end? Oh yeah, that was it. Join the academy, no problem. I'm sure to finish off, for those of you who are still here, you probably want to see that little ball of fur again, who is probably causing trouble somewhere. Where's he gone? Off causing mischief somewhere. I knew he would be, but I know some of you will probably want to see him again. So here he is. Where can we send our emails? You don't need to, okay, so email me on this previous slide, this one. So at the bottom here, nathan.waller@Macmillan Education. If you send me a list of the emails, I will make sure you all get one. And I will make a note of your name. Wissam, okay, good. Wissam, I will look you up and I can email you separately as well. He is very cute. He's like a little, he looks like a little wolf or something. But he's more like a terrorist. And that is it. We've come to the end of our 90 minutes. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. Sorry there was a few grumbles in the background. Can be difficult with a puppy in the background. But I hope you were all engaged throughout the webinar, and I hope you all enjoyed the content. If anybody has any questions or anybody wants to discuss motivation or engagement through using a Macmillan course that you're using with your students, I am more than happy to connect with you and talk to you about anything that you're doing. Just get in touch with me. And on that note, on behalf of me and Oreo here, who is going to probably want to play now with me, we wish you all the best of luck with back to school, and we thank you very much for your attendance. And we look forward to seeing you at our next back to school activity, which I think is next week on Thursday as well. Actually, I think it is the 9th, which is all around project work. And there's loads of stuff. A guy called Lusak is going to be doing this. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the day, everybody. And we will see you very soon. Goodbye.